Hello everyone, this is update for July 21, 2024, day 879 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for July 20 and July 19. I'm going to start with the general strategic updates and then I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So first, I'm going to start with West Yemen and its attack of Israel and then obvious response from Israel. I think all of these attacks, including Hezbollah attacks, are just sort of harassing attacks with actual goal to economically suffocate and destroy Israel. There is no immediate goal to actually militarily sort of attack directly and have very direct military like conflict where you can clearly say it's a war. So it's basically harassment that leads to internal exhaustion in Israel. I'm sure there's a lot of economic damage. There's economic damage to GDP, and there's going to be more of it. But if I would describe the situation, the best it would be looked through the lenses of the global conflict, which Ukraine piece of it is obviously Israel, and then Taiwan is another piece of it, and actually Venezuela is another sort of front line that's sort of not open yet, but that will be open eventually. But the point is that this conflict in the Near East is being kind of like in semi-hot stage, and it will escalate once there is coordinated decision between China, Russia, Iran, and obviously North Korea as a part of it to actually go into full-blown conflict. At that point, there will be actually real attacks by all of these Iranian proxies first, and then probably also by Iranian troops against Israel. Similar, Venezuela will attack its neighbor, and obviously China will attack Taiwan and so on. So this is most likely scenario. The other part actually in Latin America where it could be part of this big conflict is between Brazil and Argentina. So Brazil is clearly gravitating towards this alliance of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, not sort of full-blown participation, but kind of like a soft participation, let's put it this way. Brazil is getting tons of diesel fuel from Russia, so it's economically very connected. Also, fertilizer, so there's very strong economic connection, which always drives political relationship. For that reason, Brazilian president is cleaning up pro-Western, call it opposition, and former Brazilian president is being persecuted. Obviously, it's for political reasons. There's no question about it. And then Argentina is now becoming part of the West in Latin America. Probably the only actually country that's pro-Western there. And so there could be, as a result, conflict between the two down the road. So this is sort of, call it big picture of what's going on there. I'm not going to comment what happened with the U.S. situation. The only thing I would say is that Democratic Party now has a fighting chance. Before, the chances were close to zero. It's still probably losing sort of match, but the chances are not sort of, guaranteed loss versus now it's like, okay, there is some chance, but it's a small chance for sure. There's no question about it. Now let's switch to the situation in Ukraine. And sort of one thing about Ukraine and the economy is Ukraine cut off supplies of Russian crude oil to Hungary as retaliation to actions of Hungarian president. It affected not only Hungary but also Slovakia, which is effectively economic sort of vassal of Hungary because major Slovak refinery that is in Bratislava is owned by Hungarian company MOL, so it's essentially Hungarian, and so Ukraine cut off that that pipeline. I mean, stopped pumping crude oil from Russia. And the problem with these actions by obviously Ukraine is that Ukraine is buying electricity, getting electricity from Hungary and from Slovakia, which probably supply roughly, let's say, 50%, more or less, maybe even more. And it's obviously there will be retaliation against Ukraine, and that can create problems. But there's still Romania and Poland left, which are clearly supporting, I would say, strongly Ukraine, both countries. So Ukraine kind of can rely on those two in this economic conflict at this point. Now I'm going to switch to the situation actually on battlefield in Ukraine, but I'm going to just give some tactical updates, what's going on, a few sort of new developments. So as you can see here, first one is anti-tank mine. It's called TM62. It's old Soviet mine, anti-tank mine. And actually what Russian soldiers started doing, they actually used it as hand grenade. So in the picture below, you see that the Russian soldier is actually throwing this kind of like round thing, like lightish. He's throwing it into the window of the building to basically destroy Ukrainian stronghold in the building. And this anti-tank mines are extremely useful tools for close quarter attacks. It's, I would say, new development of this war. Have not been used before. I never seen it. I mean, probably sporadically it's being done sometime, but not on a sort of mass scale where it's becoming normal practice. The advantage of this is that this anti-tank mine is effectively 152 millimeter shell. So the soldier gets, instead of hand grenade, he gets 152 millimeter shell because in his hands, and it's extremely destructive, as you can imagine, because roughly it's about 7 to 8 kilograms of explosive, which is roughly the same amount that 152 millimeter shell has. So basically it's getting harder and harder to play in the rigid defense. So Russian troops, Russian military already using gliding bombs, which make rigid defense extremely ineffective and exercise in futility. And this is adding another layer towards that, another sort of nail in the coffin of rigid defense, which is what Ukrainian forces are practicing and what does not work and leads to this disastrous results on the front line that I will discuss once we switch to that area. There's another development by Russian troops. So they actually started using actively helium-filled balloons. So they just put them up about 20 kilometers away from front line And what they do, this allows to extend communication channel with Arlans and Supercoms and so on. So they effectively it extends effective range of those Russian UAVs, and that so they can do reconnaissance missions, and then obviously Russian troops can attack Ukrainian military installations or even civil installations, whatever they deem is necessary, deep in Ukrainian rear. So this really extended reach of Russian missile attacks, and they become very extremely timely because there is immediate reaction to what is Erlan seeing. So there is Ukrainian side does not have much time to adjust. Not to mention that it's really hard to spot Arlan when it's at 5 to 6 kilometers altitude. So it's effectively invisible unless you really focused on it, which is not the case in Ukrainian deep rear. So as a result, there were a lot of painful attacks by Russian forces. So this is how the small, seemingly unimportant things such as helium-filled balloon making huge changes on the battlefield. There's another piece of data also from the Russian side, and this is more anecdotal in terms of outcomes of this brute force attacks that Russian troops are waging. So from anecdotal sort of evidence, typically in such attacks, 25% are dead, 25% are heavily injured, and 25% are light injured, and 25% sort of survive without any problem, without any injuries. So the takeaway is that roughly 50% of the attacking force gets, how to say, either destroyed or removed. So basically, you lose 50% of your forces in such attacks, which is extremely deadly. As you can imagine, it's as deadly as the worst cases of World War II and World War One. So even with all of this sort of advances, attempts, and everything, the getting through Ukrainian defenses is still difficult. It does happen, but all I'm trying to say is Russia paying fairly heavy price. The problem is that Ukraine is paying equally heavy price, and when we talk about war of attrition, it leads to eventual destruction of Ukraine and loss in Ukraine losing in this war. So now let's switch to the situation on battlefield. I'm going to do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. So first situation along the state border all the way up to Kharkiv remains more or less the same, without significant sort of changes or anything that's important. Now let's look at what's going on northeast of Kharkiv, and things remain more or less the same. It's essentially stalemate, as I mentioned before. Ukrainian troops cannot completely push out Russian troops in this area of Lugansk, and they also cannot fully push Russian troops in the Vovchansk area. Although Ukrainian troops do control majority of Vovchansk at this point. But as I stated, there is no essential changes for a while here. Now let's move to the North Luhansk front line. And things here also sort of Russian troops are slowly but surely advancing, strong pressure. Obviously, as you can see, in direction of Kupiansk, Russian troops made some advances, gained some ground. They captured this village Peshane completely. Then there is a strong pressure to get to basically establish Russian bridgehead on the other side of this stream, which based on some sources they did. I don't have any full confirmation. And then strong pressure, this area from Avdiivka all the way to Terne, essentially, without major advances here in this area by Russian troops. But generally, it's negative development for Ukrainian side, although without sort of major losses. Now let's move to the situation on the North Donbass front line. And again, we're going to look at the northern sector. There is Russian pressure in all the same areas. Russian resources report that they managed to capture Avdiivka, but there is no any kind of independent verification, so I'll just leave it as is right now. But it's totally possible. Then Russian attacks against Chasiv continues. Russian troops are attempting to cross this channel in the northern part near Kalinivka. It's unclear if they were successful in establishing bridgehead. If there is confirmation, I'll provide update on that. A little bit south in this Toretsk-New York area, there's also pretty negative development, and I'll just jump discuss this as a part of Central Donbass front line. Actually, let me jump first here to explain you what's going on. So essentially, Russian troops are advancing in the southern part of Toretsk. Just the scale is too big for this to show very clearly. But essentially, there's advance here, and then there's advance into New York, essentially from the south. So this whole area is becoming kind of like little Ukrainian salient, which is threatened, and it's probably going to be lost pretty quickly. So and what also means that New York is going to be lost pretty much completely, also fairly soon. So this is going to be sort of loss here that's in the works, and in the coming sort of week or so, it will happen. It's inevitable. Let's put it this way. The way Ukrainian forces are being sort of used and so on. Now let's move to the most dangerous situation, and that I wanted to discuss is this area west of Ocheretyne. So Russian troops managed to capture village Progres without major fight, which is a very, I would say, dangerous development. This is what I mentioned before, that Ukrainian forces don't have the same level of motivation, and whatever the unit was, I don't actually know at this point. They apparently just retreated from this area without major fight, and so Russian troops captured this village without essentially any fight. And there will be more and more of these developments because of the low motivation level and extremely poor command that demotivates Ukrainian troops even more. And as Russian command goes up, it's becoming more evident to Ukrainian forces. So that really leads to even, as I said, a bigger demotivation. So this basically Russian advance continues here, and it's becoming more and more dangerous development. The other part is Ukrainian forces nearly lost this Novoselivka Persha. It's close to be sort of lost. Then it will be just small bridgehead on this eastern side, and probably going to be evacuated in short order. So Russian troops will clear up this whole area on the eastern side of this stream Volcha. The most important, though, is this sort of corridor between the two, Lozovatsky and Vovchi. And at this point, it's being breached by Russian troops, and which also means that they will continue moving forward. It's still painful scissor for Russian side, but this quick loss of this village Progres by Ukrainian forces indicates that the times when there might be uncontrollable collapse Ukrainian front line with pretty disastrous consequences. The only question is if Russian command has enough reserves to exploit that collapse, which I'm personally skeptical, but you never know. Again, this is the most dangerous development, the most dangerous situation, the entire front line of this Ukrainian-Russian war. This is how it used to be, as you can see on July 13. So essentially, this is the advance south of this railroad. Now, a little bit south in Krasnohorivka, Ukrainian forces almost lost Krasnohorivka. There is just western corner left. So again, probably by next video, it's going to be completely lost or in a video. And then Russian troops will also continue advance in that area. It will be easier because, as you can imagine, urban area gives you extra ability for defense. Now let's look at the situation on the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are fairly the same. Continued Russia pressure in the area south of Velika Novosilka. The same idea. Russian troops are trying to recapture what they lost in the summer of 23. Slowly but surely they do that, and I'll provide updates as they capture any new village. But so far it's very slow process. It's very clear that this is not the main area of application of Russian resources, this front line. Now let's look at the situation along the Dnipro River, and things here quiet, no major sort of fighting for strategic reason. As I stated, both sides don't have reserves or other areas are deemed much more important, much more relevant to the war than this. So this is quiet for now. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Till next time. Bye bye.